Hey there, I hope you're all having a very lovely day. I tried something new a while ago and I haven't done it since. I'm going to tell you about it. When it comes to gouache, I've only used the himi jelly gouache, so I decided to get some Winsor Newton Designers gouache, but not use it like gouache. I decided to get a palette, pop it in the palette and use it dry like a watercolour. And honestly, this might be the hardest way to use gouache, to actually use it completely dry. Yeah, it's difficult. And on top of trying out dry gouache for the very first time, I decided to try and paint my very first portrait with gouache. This is what I painted. I do really like it. Honestly, it looks pretty decent, but the process to get to this point, it was a struggle. It was really difficult, and I thought we could just go through the process together and talk about the struggles and what I would do differently if I was going to do it again. Gouache is a really unique medium in the sense that there is no one correct way to use it. Everyone likes to use it differently, and that's completely fine. A lot of people like to start with the dark colours first and then work their way to light. I personally prefer to start around the mid-tone. I feel like it's a lot easier to visualise where the painting's gonna go, because with gouache, when it comes to gouache, you really need to trust the process. Gouache paintings look awful until you're like 95% done, and then suddenly it's like, oh, actually it just clicks, it looks decent. But you really need to trust the process with gouache and build up the layers, and that can be really difficult to do. So I like to start somewhere around the mid-tone so I don't need to visualise it as much, and I don't think it really makes too much difference. First, I blocked in all of the colours with a really watery layer, and now I'm just going over the top and trying to make it look a little bit more like an actual person. So I started with a somewhat similar shade, and honestly this was really too dark, but it's also too yellow. I added blue and it just didn't really quite go to plan. It kind of went a bit too green, so really I probably should have added a little bit more pink to bring more life to the face. But you know, this is a journey that I'm taking you along with, and it's definitely an experience. I kind of blended the gouache far too much and didn't leave any of the lines, so that's also something that was probably a learning curve. I probably shouldn't have. Really, I feel like you should leave all of the lines there pretty obvious and then sort of blend them at the end, and I mean I didn't do that, but now I'm just going in and adding the hair. The hair really needed to be a lot darker because the hair was pretty much black. Obviously I didn't want to use black, so I did like a dark brown, and it just needed like a lot of layers to try and actually get that dark. I think going from jelly gouache, which is pretty opaque to begin with and really has quite a bit of pigment to it, to using a dry gouache, it was a little bit like watercolour in the sense that it took a long while to actually get any pigment down and to stop it from looking so streaky. It was kind of, at the beginning it felt like kind of bad quality watercolour is the best way to explain it, and I really wasn't a fan of it. I know that I probably should use it straight from the tube in future, or at least maybe like my main colours straight from the tube, but I just feel like that's not very efficient financially. You know, I don't think that's exactly necessary when you can use it just like a watercolour palette, but it was very difficult to use. I decided to make the background a sort of peach colour. I thought it would complement the skin, and I'm not quite sure it did that. I just kept refining the skin so much. As you can see, I just went over and over just trying to change the colour, and I had no plan, as you can see. I had no plan. I mean, for this clothing area, like, I kind of had a plan. I was basically going to make it red, and it wasn't supposed to be this streaky, and then I was going to go in and add details, and as you'll see in a little bit, I started adding the black and the flowers. I started adding the details, and then I was like, no, this is far too streaky. I don't like this as a base. So then I had to add another layer on top, and that was kind of new, because compared to jelly gouache, generally, if you're doing a background or if you're using it very thick, you can kind of get away with like 2 layers, you know? And I feel like with the Winsor Newton gouache being dry, you can't get away with 2 layers of anything. It's just so streaky. It's like really bad watercolours. But eventually this is probably like the 4th layer we're going in now for the hair, and eventually it's kind of stopped looking so streaky, and it almost looks like butter in some areas, which I think is a pretty good sign going forward. I really didn't want to do all of the individual strands of the hair, but honestly, I don't really know how to make hair look like hair without having to do that. I don't have a very good knowledge of hair. I really want to study it and actually like where the light hits and kind of what hair looks like. I've just kind of winged it. I'm focusing on faces at the moment, and I kind of overlook hair, and when it comes up I sort of get to this point where I try to paint it and I'm like, what do I do with hair? I don't know. But I just kept refining the skin here, and as you can see I used a slightly pinker shade because this skin was really off. She looked a little bit ill, and I was also using a lot of white to try and lighten and add highlights. The problem is I felt like regardless of how much white I was using, it just wasn't actually highlighting. It wasn't becoming lighter, because you can see there that it looks lighter, and then it was drying and it just kept blending in. It wasn't actually getting lighter. The problem was I got myself a really big zinc white because I thought that makes sense. It's a mixing white. That makes perfect sense. That must be what everyone uses, and it's not. Like, I've kind of learnt since then that everyone is sort of using I think it's titanium or permanent white, and the zinc white that's supposed to be a mixing white nobody actually uses as a mixing white, and that explains so much because it's not opaque. I remember looking at the tube and it said that it wasn't opaque, and I was like, well, that's a bit weird, because surely the white should be opaque. The white is what makes the gouache more opaque often, and yeah, the zinc white just didn't do that in the slightest. So I think going forward, I have an entire massive tube, like 30ml of zinc white, that I probably won't be able to use, because it seems like unless you want to use it like watercolour, it just makes it less opaque. It's crazy. So I'm not using that anymore. This is when I decided to do another layer of red, and as you can see, even when I layered that over the black, it really didn't cover the black whatsoever. It was really surprisingly not opaque, this entire process. Then I just started adding the eyebrows, and I mean, to be fair, it didn't lift too much of the underneath. I do think jelly gouache tends to lift a lot of what you've already put down, and I don't think this gouache felt like it was doing that, even though it felt a lot more watery, which is good. But honestly, I can't even tell you how many layers I've got on the skin at this point, and it does start to look a little bit more refined. And I do like how with gouache you can add areas of opaque, like the lines that I just added, and it sort of looks better immediately, which you can't really do with watercolour. And at this point I was really liking how it was developing, and so I just deepened a lot of the shadows. I know this kind of means that I was going light to dark, and that's the opposite of what you're meant to do, but I just felt like at the beginning there was no darkness. I kind of needed all of these layers to actually get some areas of dark paint. Like, this is the colour of the hair in the reference photo. The reference photo I got from Pixabay. That's kind of what I was basing it off, and I just don't think I could have got this kind of colour from the beginning. So I know you're supposed to work dark to light, but I mean, it just did not work. Then I added some more red because it wasn't quite red enough. This is like, what, the 4th, 5th layer? And finally, I could then add all of the little markings. And I do feel like this is the moment when I looked at it and was like, oh, this is okay, actually. And it kind of hit me that this is like where I want to be. But it was a real trusted process, and then, as I say, you just sort of get somewhere with gouache and it's like, oh, that looks good now. But this was a really difficult one. This is definitely not the first and last time that I'm going to be painting a portrait with gouache. I definitely want to paint more. I think I've got a better understanding now, and I really understand how different gouache is to watercolour. You use it in a completely different way, but it also gives a lovely matte, different effect than watercolour. That's the process. It was a really difficult one, but honestly, I do love the end result, and I do want to paint another portrait in gouache. I painted this one, I want to say about 6 months ago. I've sketched out another portrait, which I will be painting in gouache. I'm going to give it another try, finally, 6 months later, so hopefully that one will go a little bit better or be a little bit less tedious. If you've made it this far, I would love if you could drop some emojis in the comments to let me know. I appreciate all of your support, so thank you so much for watching. I will see you next week. Bye bye.